Welcome back, and tonight we're going to wander through the ghost towns of Arizona. Before we begin, find a comfortable position. Settle into your chair, your couch, or your bed. Let your shoulders relax. Let the day slowly drift away. There's nowhere you need to be and nothing you need to accomplish right now. Tonight we'll travel through dusty streets, forgotten mining camps, abandoned rail stops, and quiet desert valleys. We'll visit places that were once filled with hope, noise, and ambition. Places where thousands of people dreamed of striking it rich. Places where children played in the streets, merchants opened their shops each morning, and trains arrived carrying supplies from distant cities. Today, many of those places sit silent beneath the Arizona sun. The desert has a patient way of reclaiming what people leave behind. Wooden buildings lean toward the earth. Old signs fade beneath decades of sunlight. Empty windows stare across dry landscapes. Wind drifts through abandoned streets where footsteps have not been heard in generations. And yet, if we move slowly and listen carefully, those forgotten towns still have stories to tell. Our journey begins in the southeastern corner of Arizona, in a place called Tombstone. Today, Tombstone is famous throughout America as one of the most legendary towns of the Old West. But before it became a tourist destination, before Hollywood turned it into a symbol of frontier life, it was simply a rough mining camp growing rapidly in the middle of the desert. The story began in 1877. A prospector named Ed Schieffelin spent his days searching for silver in a region that many considered dangerous. Soldiers stationed nearby reportedly warned him that the only stone he would find out there would be his tombstone. The warning stayed with him. When he eventually discovered rich silver deposits, he named his claim Tombstone. Within only a few years, the settlement exploded with activity. Imagine arriving there in the early 1880s. The first thing you would notice would be the noise. Horses clattered across dirt roads, wagons rattled over rough ground. Miners filled the streets after long shifts underground. Storekeepers shouted to customers. Blacksmith hammers rang through the air. Music spilled from saloons late into the evening. The town grew astonishingly fast. Thousands of people arrived hoping to build new lives. Some became miners. Others opened restaurants, hotels, barbershops, bakeries, and general stores. Many had never seen Arizona before. Some had traveled from the eastern United States. Others had crossed oceans from Europe. They all carried the same dream, opportunity. The silver hidden beneath the surrounding hills seemed endless. For a while, that dream appeared to be coming true. The mines produced enormous wealth. Money flowed into the town. Brick buildings replaced wooden structures. Businesses expanded. Newspapers printed daily editions. Schools opened. Churches welcomed growing congregations. What had once been a lonely stretch of desert became one of the richest communities in the American Southwest. Yet life there was not easy. Arizona's climate could be unforgiving. Summer temperatures climbed relentlessly. Water remained precious. Dust storms occasionally swept across the region. Travel was difficult. Medical care was limited compared to larger cities. And beneath all the excitement, everyone understood a simple reality. The town existed because of silver. If the silver disappeared, everything could change. For many years, people ignored that possibility. The mines seemed productive. The streets remained busy. The future looked bright. But history often teaches the same lesson. Booms rarely last forever. Eventually, groundwater began flooding some mining shafts. Production became more expensive. Profits declined. Then came broader economic changes that reduced silver prices. Slowly, the foundations supporting the town weakened. Businesses struggled. Families moved elsewhere. Some buildings closed, others stood empty. The energy that once filled the streets gradually faded. Tombstone survived better than many Arizona mining towns. Its famous history eventually attracted visitors, but countless other settlements across Arizona were not so fortunate. Some vanished almost entirely. To understand them, we must travel farther into the desert. Imagine standing on a lonely road at sunrise. The sky glows pale orange above distant mountains. The air is cool. A gentle breeze moves through sparse desert grass. Ahead, you can just make out the remains of an old settlement. A weathered wooden building still stands. Its paint disappeared decades ago. A rusted water tank leans slightly to one side. Pieces of old machinery rest where workers left them generations earlier. At first glance, it appears abandoned. Yet every structure represents human lives. Every building once had a purpose. Every road once carried people pursuing their ambitions. One such place was Gleason. Located east of Tombstone, Gleason emerged during Arizona's mining era. At its peak, the community supported hundreds of residents. There were homes, there were businesses, there was a school, there was optimism. Miners extracted copper, silver, and other valuable minerals from nearby hills. For a period, the town appeared stable, but mining communities often depended on forces beyond their control. Commodity prices shifted. Ore quality changed. Investors came and went. Economic conditions fluctuated. When mining activity declined, many residents faced difficult choices: stay and hope conditions improved, or leave and begin again somewhere else. Many chose to leave. Families packed their belongings. Wagons rolled away. Businesses closed their doors. Gradually, silence replaced activity. Today, visitors can still see remnants of Gleason's past. The old jail remains standing. A few structures continue resisting time and weather. Each surviving building serves as a reminder that entire communities once flourished, where only emptiness now remains. As the morning sun climbs higher over the Arizona desert, we continue our journey. The landscape stretches endlessly in every direction. Mesquite trees dot the terrain. Cactus silhouettes rise against distant hills. The desert appears quiet, but hidden within that quietness are countless stories. Stories of miners, teachers, shopkeepers, railroad workers, children, dreamers, people who believed they had found their future in places that would later become ghost towns. And as we continue deeper into Arizona's forgotten past, we'll discover how quickly entire communities could appear, and how surprisingly quickly they could disappear. As we leave Gleason behind, the road carries us farther into southeastern Arizona. The desert unfolds in gentle layers. Low hills rise from the earth like waves frozen in place. The morning sunlight spreads slowly across the landscape, illuminating patches of cactus and scrub brush. In the distance, mountains appear blue and soft through the dry desert air. Travel in Arizona during the late 19th century was very different from what it is today. There were no interstate highways, no air-conditioned vehicles, no convenient gas stations waiting every few miles. A journey that might take only an hour today could require an entire day of travel. Dust covered everything. Summer heat could feel endless. Water was always precious, yet people came anyway. They arrived because Arizona offered something powerful: possibility. The promise of possibility has always been one of the strongest forces in American history. It has encouraged people to cross oceans, climb mountains, and settle in places that others considered impossible. One of those places was Courtland. Today, Courtland is little more than a collection of ruins scattered across the desert. More than a century ago, however, it was one of Arizona's fastest-growing mining communities. The town emerged in the early 1900s during a copper boom. Copper was becoming increasingly valuable. Electricity was spreading throughout America. Cities were growing. Industries required enormous amounts of metal. Copper helped power the modern world. When valuable copper deposits were discovered in this region, investors quickly took notice. Money flowed into the area. Workers arrived. Businesses followed. Almost overnight, a town began to appear. Imagine arriving in Courtland during its most prosperous years. You might see miners beginning their shifts before sunrise. You might hear whistles signaling the start of the workday. Store owners would unlock their doors. Restaurants would prepare meals for hungry workers. Children would walk toward school. The community possessed an energy that only rapidly growing towns seemed to have. Everyone believed the future would be bigger than the present. New buildings appeared regularly. Additional homes were constructed. Businesses expanded. Every month seemed to bring new opportunities. For residents, it likely felt as though the growth would continue forever. History often reveals how difficult it is for people to recognize temporary success while they are living through it. When times are good, permanence feels natural. People build homes. They make plans. They imagine decades ahead. Few stop to consider how quickly circumstances might change. In Courtland, change arrived sooner than many expected. Mining companies eventually discovered that some of the richest deposits were becoming harder to access. Costs increased, production slowed, economic conditions shifted. The same forces that had fueled the town's rapid growth now worked in the opposite direction. Jobs disappeared, families left, businesses closed. One by one, the reasons for remaining became fewer. The town that had grown so quickly began shrinking just as rapidly. Within only a few years, much of the population was gone. Buildings stood empty. Dust settled over abandoned streets. Silence replaced the sounds of industry. Today, visitors sometimes walk among the remaining ruins and wonder what life was like during those prosperous years. The answer lies not only in statistics or historical records, it lies in ordinary moments. A family eating dinner together after a long day, a shopkeeper greeting familiar customers, children racing through town on a summer afternoon. Those small moments are what truly create a community. And when a town disappears, those moments disappear with it. As the day continues, our journey carries us westward. The Arizona sun climbs higher, shadows shorten, heat begins rising from the desert floor. In the distance, another forgotten town waits quietly beneath the sky. This place is called Fairbank. Unlike many mining communities, Fairbank existed because of transportation, the railroad. During the 19th century, railroads transformed America. They connected distant regions. They transported people and goods across enormous distances. Communities often appeared wherever railroad lines stopped. Fairbank became one of those communities. Founded in the 1880s, it served as an important transportation center. Trains arrived carrying passengers, supplies, and mail. Freight moved through the town. Businesses flourished because travelers needed food, lodging, and services. At its peak, Fairbank was a busy and important place. Imagine standing near the station as a train approaches. The sound arrives first, a distant rumble, then a whistle echoing across the valley. Gradually, the locomotive appears. Steam rises into the air. Passengers gather their belongings. Workers unload cargo. The station fills with movement and conversation. For many residents, these trains represented connection to the wider world. News arrived by rail. Products arrived by rail. Opportunities arrived by rail. Without the railroad, life in many frontier communities would have been far more isolated. But transportation networks change, routes shift, economic priorities evolve. Over time, Fairbank's importance diminished. Traffic declined. Businesses struggled. Population decreased. The familiar pattern repeated itself. What had once seemed permanent slowly faded. Today, portions of Fairbank have been preserved. Visitors can still see buildings and imagine the town's former activity. The preservation allows modern travelers to experience a small piece of Arizona's railroad history. And perhaps that is one of the most fascinating aspects of ghost towns. They allow us to see time itself. Most modern cities constantly replace old structures with new ones. History becomes hidden beneath layers of development. Ghost towns are different. In many cases, they remain suspended between past and present. They offer a glimpse into moments that would otherwise be forgotten. As afternoon arrives, the desert grows quieter. The heat softens movement. Even the wind seems slower. This is a good time to pause and imagine the countless people who once crossed these landscapes. Prospectors searching for mineral wealth, railroad workers laying track beneath the sun, ranchers tending cattle, teachers educating children in one-room schoolhouses, store owners hoping for another successful season. Most never imagined that future generations would describe their communities as ghost towns. To them, these places were simply home. Home is a powerful idea. It exists far beyond buildings. A home can be a mining camp, a ranch, a railroad settlement, a desert town surrounded by mountains. What matters most are the people who give a place meaning. When those people leave, even the strongest buildings can begin to feel empty. As the sun slowly starts its descent toward the western horizon, our journey through Arizona's forgotten communities continues. Ahead lie more abandoned settlements, more remarkable stories, and more reminders of how quickly fortunes could change in the American West. For now, allow the image of those quiet desert streets to remain in your mind. The fading railroad whistles, the distant mountains, the warm Arizona sunlight, and the lingering echoes of towns that once believed their futures would last forever. As the afternoon light begins to soften, we continue our journey across Arizona. The desert seems endless. Long stretches of open land spread toward distant mountains. The colors slowly change as the sun lowers in the sky. Bright gold becomes warm amber. Shadows grow longer. The air cools ever so slightly. For travelers crossing Arizona more than a century ago, these evening hours often brought relief. The intense heat of the day began to fade. Work slowed. Families gathered for supper. Animals settled for the night. And in dozens of towns scattered across the territory, lamps gradually illuminated streets that only a few hours earlier had been filled with dust and sunlight. Tonight, we travel to one of the most remarkable ghost towns in Arizona, a place called Jerome. Unlike many abandoned settlements hidden deep in remote valleys, Jerome clings dramatically to the side of Cleopatra Hill. Even today, the town seems to defy gravity. Buildings perch along steep slopes. Roads twist around the mountainside. Looking down from above, the landscape stretches across miles of desert and rugged terrain. Long before Jerome became known as a historic destination, it was a booming mining town. Its story began with copper. Copper shaped countless communities throughout the American West. It helped build electrical systems. It powered industry. It connected a growing nation. And beneath the mountains surrounding Jerome lay enormous deposits of the valuable metal. As mining operations expanded during the late 19th century, workers poured into the area. Investors followed. Businesses appeared. Soon, Jerome transformed into one of the largest communities in Arizona territory. Imagine arriving there during its busiest years. The mountainside would have been alive with activity. Miners moved between shafts and processing facilities. Steam engines worked throughout the day. Ore carts rattled along tracks. Merchants welcomed customers. Restaurants prepared meals. Hotels accommodated newcomers. The sounds of industry echoed through the canyon. Unlike some smaller mining camps that consisted mainly of temporary structures, Jerome developed into a substantial town. Brick buildings appeared, schools opened, churches served growing congregations. Families established roots. Children grew up there. People imagined long futures for themselves and their community. But Jerome faced a challenge that few towns had ever encountered: the mountain itself. The ground beneath parts of the town was unstable. Years of mining altered the landscape. As tunnels expanded underground, sections of the mountain gradually shifted. Buildings moved, roads cracked, foundations settled. Some structures slowly drifted downhill over time. Imagine living in a town where the earth itself seemed to be moving beneath your feet. Residents became accustomed to unusual sights. Walls developed cracks, stairways tilted, buildings required constant maintenance. Despite these difficulties, life continued. People adapted. Communities often display remarkable resilience. Humans have an extraordinary ability to accept circumstances that would seem impossible to outsiders. For many residents, Jerome was simply home. The challenges became part of daily life. Children attended school, workers reported for shifts, businesses opened each morning, the town endured. Yet no mining community remains immune to economic reality. Eventually, production declined, ore became more difficult to extract. Costs increased. The mining industry changed. As employment opportunities disappeared, people began leaving. Population numbers shrank. Businesses closed. Entire neighborhoods grew quiet. The familiar story of the American West unfolded once again. Boom, growth, prosperity, decline, departure, silence. Today, Jerome survives in a different form. Visitors arrive to explore its history. Artists maintain studios. Historic buildings remain standing. Unlike many ghost towns that vanished almost entirely, Jerome found a second life. But reminders of its mining past remain everywhere. The steep streets, the old structures, the mountain itself, all continue telling the story of a community shaped by copper and determination. As evening approaches, we leave Jerome behind. The road carries us toward another forgotten chapter of Arizona history. Far from bustling cities and major highways hidden among desert hills lies a place called Swansea. Today, Swansea is one of Arizona's most atmospheric ghost towns. The name sounds almost peaceful, and now, surrounded by silence, it truly is. Yet during its peak years, Swansea was anything but quiet. Founded as a mining community, it grew around copper production during the early 20th century. Investors believed the area held tremendous potential. A railroad connection helped transport materials and supplies. Workers arrived seeking employment. New buildings appeared. The town expanded. Like many communities of the era, Swansea represented optimism. People invested not only money, but hope. Hope that mines would remain productive. Hope that businesses would succeed. Hope that families could build stable futures. For a time, those hopes seemed justified. The town developed schools, stores, homes, and public facilities. Residents built routines around work, family, and community life. Morning whistles marked the beginning of shifts. Children walked familiar paths to school. Neighbors knew one another. The rhythms of daily life created a sense of permanence. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates how fragile permanence can be. Mining towns depended heavily upon a single industry. When that industry weakened, everything else became vulnerable. A decline in production affected workers. Workers leaving affected businesses. Businesses closing affected families. Each change triggered another. Eventually, the cycle became impossible to stop. People moved elsewhere. The railroad ceased operations. Buildings were abandoned. Nature began its slow reclamation. Today, visitors can still walk among Swansea's remains. Concrete foundations emerge from the desert floor. Rusting equipment sits beneath open skies. Stone walls stand where homes and businesses once operated. The silence is remarkable, especially when you consider how much activity once filled the area. If you stand quietly, it becomes easier to imagine the past. A train arriving in the distance, workers returning home, voices drifting from nearby buildings, children laughing, doors opening and closing, the ordinary sounds of everyday life. Ghost towns often remind us that history is not only about famous individuals or major events. Most history belongs to ordinary people, people whose names rarely appear in textbooks, people who worked hard, raised families, and contributed to communities that later disappeared. The story of Arizona's ghost towns is really the story of those people, the miners, the teachers, the railroad workers, the store owners, the cooks, the children. Their experiences created these towns. Without them, the buildings would have been nothing more than wood, brick, and stone. As twilight settles across the desert, colors begin fading from the landscape. The mountains become dark silhouettes. The sky turns shades of pink and purple. Stars gradually emerge overhead. Arizona's night sky can feel enormous. Far from major cities, countless stars become visible. For generations, residents of remote towns looked up at those same constellations. After long days of work, they stepped outside and saw familiar stars shining above the desert. Perhaps they wondered about the future. Perhaps they imagined what their towns would become. Few could have predicted how dramatically things would change, yet their stories remain. Preserved in old photographs, historical records, abandoned buildings, and the quiet landscapes that continue to remember them. As darkness spreads gently across the Arizona desert, our journey continues onward. Ahead lie more forgotten settlements, more remarkable lives, and more stories waiting patiently beneath the stars. Night has now settled across the Arizona desert. The last traces of sunlight have disappeared behind distant mountains. The air is cooler. The wind moves gently across open land. Above us stretches a sky filled with countless stars. Far from modern cities, the darkness feels different. There are no bright billboards, no endless streams of headlights, no glow from towering office buildings. Instead, there is quiet, the kind of quiet that allows you to hear the soft movement of the wind through desert grass, the kind of quiet that makes distant sounds seem mysterious and important. Tonight, as we continue our journey through Arizona's forgotten places, we travel south toward one of the state's most fascinating ghost towns, a place called Ruby. Today, Ruby sits near the border between the United States and Mexico. The surrounding landscape is beautiful and remote. Rolling hills rise from the desert floor. Oak trees appear among the rocky terrain. Seasonal streams occasionally bring life to the valleys. At first glance, it may seem difficult to imagine why a town ever existed here, but hidden beneath the earth were valuable minerals. And wherever valuable minerals were discovered, people followed. Ruby began as a mining settlement during the late 19th century. Like many frontier communities, it started small. A handful of buildings, a few workers, limited services. Yet as mining activity expanded, so did the town. More people arrived, new businesses opened, families settled in the area. By the early 20th century, Ruby had become a thriving community. Imagine arriving there on a spring morning around 1920. You might hear children playing before school. You might see workers preparing for another day at the mines. Store owners sweep their sidewalks. Neighbors greet one another. The smell of breakfast drifts from nearby homes. Life feels ordinary, comfortable, predictable. And perhaps that is one of the most surprising aspects of ghost towns. When we hear the term ghost town, we often imagine places that were strange or temporary, but for the people who lived there, these communities felt normal. They were not living in a future ghost town. They were living in a hometown, a place where birthdays were celebrated, where friendships formed, where families built their lives. Ruby was no exception. The town eventually included a school, post office, stores, and housing for workers and their families. Residents attended community events. Children grew up exploring nearby hills. People planned for the future, yet life on the frontier often carried risks. Isolation created challenges. Medical care could be limited, economic conditions could change suddenly, and in Ruby's case, another problem emerged: crime. The region occasionally experienced violence connected to smuggling and border activity. Several tragic incidents occurred during the town's history. These events shocked residents and attracted attention throughout Arizona. For a time, Ruby gained a reputation as a dangerous place, yet despite these difficulties, the community endured. The mines continued operating, families remained, businesses stayed open, life moved forward. Then, as happened so often throughout the American West, economic realities intervened. Mining production declined, profits decreased, opportunities became fewer. Gradually, residents began leaving. Some moved to larger cities. Others followed new mining booms elsewhere. Businesses closed. Schools lost students. The population shrank. One family left, then another, then another. The process rarely happened all at once. Instead, it unfolded slowly. A town does not become abandoned overnight. First, a few homes sit empty, then a business closes. Then a school combines classes because there are fewer children. The changes accumulate gradually until one day people realize the community is no longer what it once was. Ruby eventually faded into silence. Today, visitors can still explore many surviving structures. School buildings remain, homes still stand. Old foundations mark locations where businesses once operated. Walking through Ruby is like stepping into a photograph from another era. The past feels surprisingly close. As we continue our nighttime journey, let us leave Ruby behind and travel farther north. The moon hangs above the desert. Its pale light illuminates distant hills. The road stretches endlessly ahead. Eventually, we arrive at another forgotten settlement, a place called Harshaw. Harshaw sits within the rolling landscapes of southern Arizona. Today it is quiet, but during the late 19th century it was filled with activity. Like many Arizona communities, Harshaw existed because of mining. Silver discoveries attracted attention. Investors funded operations. Workers arrived seeking opportunity. Businesses followed. Soon, a town emerged. At its peak, hundreds of people called Harshaw home. There were homes, stores, a school, community gatherings, the familiar ingredients of small-town life. Imagine a typical evening in Harshaw more than 100 years ago. The workday is ended. Families gather for supper. Lamps glow inside windows. Conversations drift across porches. Children finish their games before heading indoors. The sounds are simple, ordinary. Yet together, they create something powerful, a sense of belonging. Belonging is one of the most valuable things any community can offer. People often remain in difficult places because of the relationships they build there. Neighbors become friends. Friends become extended family. The town itself becomes part of a person's identity. For residents of Harshaw, that identity was tied closely to mining. When the mines prospered, the town prospered. When mining declined, the community faced uncertainty. Unfortunately, uncertainty eventually became reality. Production decreased. Jobs disappeared. Economic opportunities faded. The familiar pattern returned. People moved away. Businesses closed. Buildings stood empty. Nature gradually reclaimed the area. Today, only a handful of structures remain. One old building, still standing against the passage of time, serves as a reminder of the lives once lived there. The surrounding hills are peaceful now. The silence feels almost complete. Yet beneath that silence rests an entire chapter of American history. A chapter written not by famous leaders or wealthy industrialists, but by ordinary men and women seeking opportunity in the Arizona Territory. As the night deepens, we pause for a moment. The desert around us is still. Stars shine overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote calls. The sound echoes briefly before fading away. It is easy to understand why people become fascinated by ghost towns. These places invite reflection. They remind us that every community, no matter how large or successful, exists within time. Nothing remains unchanged forever. Industries evolve. Transportation routes shift. Populations move. Economic conditions fluctuate. Yet the stories of the people who lived in these places continue. As long as someone remembers them, as long as someone tells their stories, as long as travelers pause to wonder about the lives hidden behind abandoned walls and weathered foundations. Tonight, beneath the Arizona stars, we are doing exactly that. And our journey is far from over. Ahead lies another remarkable ghost town, one connected to gold, ambition, and one of the most successful mining operations in Arizona history. Its name is Vulture City, and that is where our story will continue next. The night remains calm as we continue our journey. Above us, the stars seem brighter than ever. The Arizona desert stretches in every direction, quiet and vast beneath the moonlight. The air is cool now, carrying the faint scent of dry earth and distant vegetation. Somewhere far away, a gentle breeze moves across the landscape. It is difficult to imagine that these peaceful surroundings were once filled with thousands of people chasing one powerful dream, the dream of gold. Tonight, our path leads us to one of Arizona's most famous ghost towns, a place known as Vulture City. The story begins in the year 1863. At that time, Arizona was still a rugged frontier. Large portions of the territory remained largely unexplored by settlers. Travel was dangerous. Roads were limited. Many regions existed far beyond the reach of established towns. Yet prospectors continued searching. They crossed deserts. They climbed mountains. They followed dry riverbeds, always hoping to discover something valuable hidden beneath the earth. One of those prospectors was a man named Henry Wickenburg. According to local legend, he noticed a vulture circling overhead while traveling through the area. Not long afterward, he discovered gold. The mine that emerged became known as the Vulture Mine. Whether the story of the bird is completely accurate or not, the name remained, and so did the gold. The discovery proved incredibly important. Rich deposits attracted attention almost immediately. Investors arrived, workers followed, supplies flowed into the region, and before long, a town began growing around the mine. Imagine arriving at Vulture City during its most prosperous years. The first thing you would notice might be the activity. The town was alive. Miners worked long shifts underground, blacksmiths repaired equipment, wagons carried supplies between locations, merchants sold goods to workers and families. The sounds of hammers, voices, horses, and machinery filled the air. Unlike some smaller camps that appeared briefly and vanished quickly, Vulture City became a substantial settlement. At its peak, hundreds of people lived there. The town included housing, workshops, offices, and stores. There was even a school for children. People built lives there. They planned futures. They imagined stability. For many residents, the mine represented opportunity. Some hoped to earn enough money to purchase land. Others wanted to support their families. Some dreamed of opening businesses. The gold mine served as the foundation supporting all of those ambitions. and for many years it seemed reliable. Gold continued flowing from the earth. Profits remained strong. The community expanded. Yet mining life was never easy. The work could be exhausting. Conditions underground were often dangerous. Temperatures could become extreme. Accidents sometimes occurred. Workers accepted risks that would surprise many modern people. They did so because the rewards seemed worth pursuing. As we stand quietly beneath the Arizona stars, it is worth pausing to think about those workers. History often focuses on discoveries and fortunes, but every successful mine depended on ordinary individuals. People who woke before sunrise, people who worked long hours, people whose names rarely appear in history books. Without them, towns like Vulture City would never have existed. As the years passed, the mine continued producing gold. Thousands of ounces emerged from the surrounding hills. The operation became one of the most productive in Arizona's history. For a time, prosperity appeared secure, but as we have seen throughout our journey, no boom lasts forever. Eventually, conditions changed. Ore became harder to extract. Operating costs increased. Economic realities shifted. The same cycle that affected countless western towns eventually reached Vulture City. Mining activity slowed. Employment opportunities declined. Population decreased. Families moved elsewhere. Buildings were abandoned. The town that had once seemed permanent gradually entered a period of decline. And then something remarkable happened. Silence arrived. The kind of silence that only follows years of activity. Imagine returning decades later. The streets are empty. Doors remain closed. The sounds of work have vanished. No children run between buildings. No wagons arrive carrying supplies. Only wind moves through the town. Nature begins reclaiming what people leave behind. Paint fades. Wood weathers. Dust settles. Time continues its steady work. Today, many of Vulture City's structures still stand. Visitors can walk among them and imagine the lives once lived there. Old buildings remain remarkably intact. The schoolhouse survives. Workshops remain visible. Paths once traveled by miners can still be followed. There is something fascinating about places like this. They allow us to stand in the same locations, occupied by people more than a century ago. The distance between past and present suddenly feels smaller. As we leave Vulture City behind, our journey continues through the darkness. The road ahead is quiet. Moonlight washes across the desert floor. Mountains appear as dark silhouettes against the horizon. And as we travel, it becomes clear that Arizona's ghost towns share a common thread. Each began with hope, not necessarily wealth, not necessarily fame. Hope that tomorrow would be better than today. Hope that hard work would lead to opportunity. Hope that families could build meaningful lives. Those hopes brought thousands of people into challenging environments. People endured heat, isolation, danger, uncertainty because they believed in the future. Sometimes those beliefs were rewarded, sometimes they were not. Yet the willingness to try remains one of the defining characteristics of American history. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, communities appeared across deserts, mountains, forests, and plains. Many succeeded, many failed. All left stories behind. Tonight we have followed some of those stories through Arizona, but there is another aspect of ghost towns that deserves our attention. The people who remained after others left. Not everyone departed immediately when fortunes changed. Some stayed. A store owner hoping business might return. A miner convinced another discovery was just around the corner. A family unwilling to abandon the only home they had ever known. Imagine living in a town during its final years. Each month brings fewer neighbors. More buildings stand empty. The familiar sounds become less frequent. The future feels uncertain. Yet every morning life continues. Breakfast is prepared, chores are completed, conversations take place. Even as a community fades, daily life persists. Perhaps that gradual transition is one of the most human parts of these stories. Most endings are not dramatic. They happen quietly. One family leaves, then another, until eventually a place that once felt full of possibility becomes a memory. As midnight approaches, the desert grows even quieter. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The landscape appears timeless. Yet, hidden throughout these hills and valleys are reminders that countless people once called this region home. They built schools, opened businesses, raised children, celebrated holidays, shared meals, worked hard, dreamed big. And although many of their towns no longer exist as living communities, their stories remain woven into the history of Arizona. The desert remembers, the buildings remember, the old roads remember, and tonight, as we travel beneath the stars, we remember too. Ahead, our journey will take us toward forgotten railroad settlements, abandoned desert crossings, and some of the smallest ghost towns Arizona has ever known. For now, simply listen to the wind moving softly across the desert. Imagine the moonlight touching old wooden buildings. Imagine distant mountains standing watch over empty streets. And allow yourself to drift gently through the quiet landscapes of Arizona's past. The night deepens as we continue our journey. The moon hangs high above the Arizona desert now, casting a silver glow across the landscape. Long shadows stretch across empty valleys. Ancient cacti stand quietly beneath the stars, much as they have for generations. The desert at night possesses a special kind of stillness. It is not completely silent. If you listen carefully, you might hear a distant owl, the rustle of a small animal moving through brush, the soft whisper of wind across rocky hillsides. But compared to the noise of modern life, the quiet feels immense. Perhaps that is why ghost towns seem to belong naturally to the desert. Both invite us to slow down. Both remind us that time moves differently when we stop rushing. As we travel onward tonight, our path leads us toward a place that many travelers pass through, but few intended to stay in forever. A railroad town, a place whose existence depended entirely on movement. The movement of trains, the movement of people, the movement of goods across great distances. Throughout the American West, railroads transformed everything. Before railroads, traveling across vast regions could take weeks. Supplies were expensive. Communication was slow. Settlements remained isolated. But once railroads arrived, entire regions changed almost overnight. Towns appeared where none had existed before. Businesses opened. Workers arrived. New opportunities emerged. Arizona experienced this transformation just like many Western territories. The railroad connected distant communities. It carried ore from mines. It delivered equipment. It brought mail and newspapers. It transported families seeking new beginnings. For a time, railroad towns thrived. One such place was called Gila City. Today, very little remains, but during its brief existence, it played an important role in the movement of people and supplies across Arizona. The settlement developed near the Gila River, one of the most important waterways in the region. Long before modern highways, travelers often followed rivers because they provided access to water and easier routes through challenging terrain. Imagine arriving at Gila City during the late 19th century. The settlement is busy. Travelers arrive from distant locations. Wagons move through town. Merchants offer supplies. Workers unload cargo. The atmosphere feels temporary and permanent at the same time. Many people passing through expect to continue their journeys. Others decide to stay. That combination creates an interesting energy, a feeling that anything might happen. Many Western towns experience that feeling. They stood at crossroads, places where different lives intersected briefly before continuing in separate directions. Yet crossroads can change. Transportation routes evolve, new infrastructure appears, old paths lose importance. As Arizona developed, some communities found themselves bypassed. The flow of travelers shifted elsewhere. Economic activity followed. Without the movement of people and goods, many transportation-based settlements struggled. Gila City eventually faded, buildings disappeared, residents left, nature reclaimed the area. Today, only traces remain. Yet for a brief period, it served as an important connection point within a rapidly changing frontier. As we continue our nighttime travels, the stars seem almost endless above us. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a pale river of light. For generations, residents of Arizona's ghost towns looked upward at the same view. Without modern light pollution, the stars would have appeared incredibly bright. Imagine standing outside a small home more than 100 years ago. The day's work is finished, the air has cooled, the town is settling into sleep. You step onto the porch and look upward. Thousands of stars shine overhead. The same stars visible tonight. The same stars that watch miners descend into shafts. The same stars that watched trains cross the desert. The same stars that watched entire towns rise and fall. There's something comforting about that continuity. Human communities change, buildings come and go, industries appear and disappear, yet the night sky remains. As our journey continues, we arrive at another forgotten settlement, this one smaller than many we have visited so far. A place that rarely appears in history books, a place called Charleston. Charleston once existed near Tombstone during Arizona's silver boom. At first, it benefited from nearby mining activity. Workers needed services. Families needed homes. Businesses saw opportunities. Soon, a community emerged. Unlike some rough mining camps, Charleston developed a reputation as a more orderly settlement. Families lived there. Schools operated there. Daily life followed familiar rhythms. Morning routines, work schedules, evening gatherings. The countless ordinary moments that create a community. Yet Charleston faced a challenge that many Western towns could not avoid: dependence on a larger neighbor. Its fortunes were closely connected to nearby mining operations. When mining prospered, Charleston prospered. When mining declined, Charleston suffered. Economic changes eventually reduced activity throughout the region. Opportunities became fewer. Residents left. Businesses closed. The town entered a slow decline. Today, little remains. The desert has reclaimed much of the site. Yet if you stand there quietly, it is possible to imagine what once existed. Children walking home from school, merchants greeting customers, neighbors discussing local news, simple moments, small moments. Yet those moments matter deeply to the people who live them. History often focuses on extraordinary events, major discoveries, famous battles, important leaders. But most people experience history through ordinary days, preparing meals, going to work, talking with friends, watching children grow up. Ghost towns remind us of those ordinary experiences. They remind us that every abandoned building once belonged to someone's daily life. Every empty street once carried footsteps. Every forgotten foundation once supported a home. As the hours pass and the desert grows even quieter, we continue moving through Arizona's forgotten landscapes. The moon begins its slow journey westward. Temperatures drop slightly. The wind shifts direction. Somewhere in the darkness, old roads continue crossing valleys and hills. Many of those roads once connected towns that no longer exist. Travelers followed them. Mail coaches followed them. Miners followed them. families followed them. Now some are little more than faint traces across the desert floor. Time has a way of softening everything. Roads fade, buildings weather, memories become stories. Stories become history, and history becomes something we quietly revisit beneath the stars. Tonight, as we travel through Arizona's ghost towns, we are not simply exploring abandoned places. We are exploring the hopes and dreams of the people who built them. People who believed they had found opportunity. People who worked hard under difficult conditions. People who contributed to communities that seemed permanent in their own time. The desert has preserved pieces of those communities. Enough for us to remember, enough for us to imagine, enough for us to continue listening. And as the night carries us onward, more forgotten settlements wait ahead. Some famous, some nearly forgotten, each with its own story, each with its own quiet place in the history of Arizona. For now, allow yourself to picture the moonlit desert, the distant mountains, the empty roads, the stars above, and the countless lives that once filled these silent places with activity, laughter, hope, and purpose. The night continues quietly around us. The moon has begun its slow descent toward the western horizon, though there are still many hours before dawn. The stars remain bright above the Arizona desert. Their light falls softly across old roads, forgotten foundations, and empty landscapes that once echoed with human activity. For now, let us continue our journey. Imagine yourself traveling along a dusty stagecoach route sometime in the late 19th century. The road ahead is rough. The wagon wheels creak with every bump. The horses move steadily through the darkness. There are no streetlights, no glowing signs, no GPS directions. Only the stars, the landscape, and the knowledge passed from one traveler to another. In those days, many Arizona communities depended upon stagecoach routes long before railroads arrived. The stagecoach was more than transportation. It carried news. It delivered mail. It connected isolated settlements to the outside world. For many residents, the arrival of a stagecoach represented one of the most important moments of the week. Letters arrived from distant family members. Newspapers carried stories from eastern cities. Supplies replenished local stores. Travelers brought fresh information and new opportunities. Entire communities organized themselves around these connections. One forgotten settlement that benefited from such travel networks was called Oro Bell. Today, very little remains. In fact, many modern Arizonans have never heard its name. Yet during Arizona's mining era, it briefly became part of the state's long story of ambition and opportunity. The name itself sounds almost poetic. Oro Bell, a name inspired by gold, a name filled with optimism. When prospectors discovered valuable minerals nearby, excitement spread quickly. Investors became interested. Workers arrived. Temporary camps appeared. Some people believed they were witnessing the birth of another successful western town. For a time, those hopes seemed justified. Buildings appeared. Businesses opened. The familiar pattern repeated itself. Opportunity attracted people. People attracted more opportunity. The settlement expanded. Imagine standing there during its busiest years. The desert around you remains vast and beautiful. Mountains rise in the distance. Sunlight reflects from rocky hills. Nearby, workers discuss mining operations. Merchants greet customers. Children chase one another through dusty streets. At that moment, the future appears promising. No one knows how the story will end. That uncertainty is something we often forget when looking back at history. We know which towns survived. We know which towns disappeared. But the people living there did not possess that knowledge. Every community existed within the uncertainty of the present moment. Just like communities today, Residents made plans, built homes, started businesses, raised families, all without knowing what future generations would eventually call their town: a success, a failure, or a ghost town. Eventually, as happened so many times across Arizona, economic conditions changed. Mining became less profitable. Investors looked elsewhere. Workers moved on. The population declined. Buildings stood empty. And another settlement slowly entered history. As we continue traveling through the night, let us think for a moment about the people who left these places behind. Leaving a town is rarely easy, especially when that town has become home. Imagine packing your belongings into a wagon, perhaps a few pieces of furniture, clothing, photographs, books, tools, the small possessions accumulated over years of life. Outside, familiar streets stretch before you. The school your children attended, the store where you purchased supplies, the neighbors you greeted each morning. Everything feels familiar, yet circumstances have changed. Opportunities are disappearing. A difficult decision has been made. It is time to leave. Throughout Arizona's history, countless families experience moments exactly like that. Not because they wanted to leave, but because economic reality left them little choice. And so they moved onward, to larger towns, to new mining districts, to growing cities, always searching for stability, always searching for opportunity. In many ways, that search helped shape the American West. The willingness to move, the willingness to begin again, the willingness to face uncertainty. Those qualities appear repeatedly throughout the stories of Arizona's ghost towns. As the night grows quieter still, we arrive at another forgotten location. This place was never a large city, never a major transportation hub, never famous beyond its immediate region. Yet its story is just as important, because most Western communities were not famous. Most were ordinary places filled with ordinary people, places where life unfolded one day at a time. This settlement sits among rolling hills where cattle once grazed beneath wide Arizona skies. Ranching communities often develop differently from mining towns. Mining booms could create rapid growth. Thousands of people might arrive within months. Ranching communities tended to grow more gradually. Families established homesteads. Livestock operations expanded. Small businesses appeared to serve local needs. The pace felt slower, more stable. Yet ranching communities faced challenges of their own: drought, harsh weather, changing markets, transportation difficulties. A single difficult season could create enormous hardship. Several small Arizona settlements disappeared, not because minerals ran out, but because maintaining life in such remote regions proved increasingly difficult. Water was often the deciding factor. In the desert, water determines almost everything: where people settle, where animals graze, where businesses operate. Without reliable water supplies, communities struggle. Even prosperous towns can decline. Throughout Arizona's history, water shaped the fate of countless settlements. Some survived because they secured reliable sources. Others vanished because they could not. As we travel farther through the darkness, the importance of water becomes easier to understand. Dry riverbeds cross the landscape. Arroyos carve paths through desert soil. Occasional springs support clusters of vegetation. Every sign of water attracts life. Animals gather there. Plants thrive there. People settle there. And when water disappears, communities often disappear as well. The relationship between people and the desert has always required adaptation. Arizona's ghost towns reveal that lesson repeatedly. Success depended not only on ambition, but also on geography, on climate, on resources, on countless factors beyond human control. Perhaps that is why these stories remain so fascinating. They remind us that history is never simple. Communities do not succeed or fail for only one reason. Many forces work together: opportunity, luck, resources, timing, transportation, weather, human determination all play a role. As midnight drifts toward the early hours of morning, the desert seems even more peaceful. The air is cool now. The wind has nearly disappeared. The stars continue their silent movement overhead. Somewhere beyond the horizon lie dozens more forgotten settlements, places whose names have faded from maps, places remembered only through old records and weathered ruins. Yet each one contributed something to Arizona's story. Each one added another chapter, another collection of lives, another set of hopes and dreams carried across the desert. And tonight, as we move slowly through these landscapes beneath the stars, we continue gathering those stories one by one. The road stretches onward into the darkness. The mountains stand watch in the distance. And somewhere ahead, waiting quietly beneath the Arizona sky, another ghost town prepares to share its story. The road continues ahead of us. It winds gently through the sleeping desert, disappearing into darkness before reappearing again beneath the pale glow of moonlight. Around us, the landscape feels timeless. The mountains do not seem to move. The stars continue their slow journey across the sky. The desert waits patiently, just as it has for thousands of years, and yet hidden within this seemingly unchanging landscape are countless human stories. Stories of arrival, stories of hope, stories of success, and stories of departure. Tonight, as we continue our journey through Arizona's ghost towns, we arrive at a place whose story feels almost forgotten by time itself, a place called Courtland. Unlike Tombstone or Jerome, Courtland is not widely known. Most travelers pass through Arizona without ever hearing its name. Yet for a brief moment in history, it was filled with life. The settlement emerged during Arizona's mining era, when discoveries of valuable minerals could transform empty desert into a bustling community almost overnight. News traveled quickly in those days. A prospector finds promising ore. Word spreads. Investors become interested. Workers arrive. Merchants follow. Soon, a town begins taking shape. This pattern repeated itself again and again across the American West. Courtland was one of many places born from that cycle. Imagine arriving there during its busiest years. The settlement is modest but active. Wooden buildings line dusty roads. Nearby hills show signs of mining activity. People move between homes, businesses, and work sites. Life feels busy, purposeful. Every person seems to be working towards something. That sense of purpose was common throughout Arizona's frontier communities. Many residents had traveled long distances to reach these places. Some came from eastern states, others arrived from Europe still, others came from Mexico and neighboring territories. They brought different backgrounds, different experiences, and different dreams. Yet many shared one common goal. They wanted opportunity. The American West represented possibility, a chance to begin again, a chance to improve one's circumstances, a chance to build something meaningful. For many people, that possibility justified tremendous hardship. Long journeys, extreme weather, financial uncertainty, physical danger, all were accepted because the potential rewards seemed worthwhile. As we move quietly through the moonlit remains of places like Courtland, it becomes easier to appreciate the courage required to settle these regions. Today, if we encounter difficulties while traveling, help is usually nearby. Roads connect almost every community. Communication happens instantly. Supplies are readily available. Life on the frontier was different. A simple task often required significant effort. A medical emergency could become serious very quickly. A delayed supply shipment could create major problems. Residents learned to rely on themselves and their neighbors. Communities became tightly connected because cooperation was often necessary for survival. In many ghost towns, those relationships formed the strongest part of daily life. Neighbors helped one another. Families shared resources. People worked together during difficult times. Those connections transformed isolated settlements into genuine communities. As the years passed, however, Cochrane faced the same challenges experienced by many mining towns. Production fluctuated, economic conditions changed, investment slowed. Gradually, the population began shrinking. Some residents left in search of better opportunities. Others remained hoping conditions would improve. But hope alone cannot sustain a town indefinitely. Eventually, the community faded. Buildings were abandoned, roads became quieter. The desert began reclaiming the landscape. Today, only fragments remain. Yet even fragments can tell stories. An old foundation, a collapsed wall, a rusted piece of machinery. Each serves as a reminder that people once lived, worked, and dreamed there. As we continue onward, the night grows deeper. The moon has moved lower in the sky. Its light now casts longer shadows across the desert floor. Far in the distance, a coyote calls once more. The sound echoes briefly before fading into silence. It is a peaceful sound, a reminder that while human communities come and go, the natural world continues. The desert witnessed every stage of Arizona's history. It watched prospectors arrive. It watched towns expand. It watched railroads cross valleys. It watched families build homes. And later it watched many of those same communities disappear. The desert remembers everything, not through words, not through books, but through quiet persistence, through landscapes that outlast generations, through mountains that remain standing long after buildings have vanished. As we travel farther north, we begin thinking about another important part of Arizona's ghost town history: schools. At first, schools may seem like a small detail, yet they reveal something important about these communities. A mining camp can appear quickly, workers can arrive rapidly, businesses can open almost overnight, but a school suggests something deeper, a belief in the future. When residents build a school, they are saying something important. They are saying that children will grow up here, that families will remain, that the community expects to endure. Many Arizona ghost towns eventually established schools. Some consisted of only a single room. Others grew larger as populations increased. Teachers worked under challenging conditions. Resources were often limited. Yet education remained important. Imagine a classroom in a small Arizona mining town around 1905. The schoolhouse stands beneath a bright desert sky. Inside, students of different ages sit together. A single teacher manages multiple grade levels. The room is warm, sunlight streams through windows. Outside, the sounds of the frontier continue. Wagons pass occasionally. Workers head toward mines. The town carries on around them. For the children sitting inside that classroom, the ghost town of the future does not exist. Their world feels permanent. Their friendships feel permanent. Their routines feel permanent. And perhaps that is one of the most moving aspects of ghost town history. The people living there rarely knew they were witnessing a temporary chapter. Life felt normal, just as our own lives feel normal today. History always appears clearer when viewed from the future. Yet while events are unfolding, uncertainty remains. No one knows exactly what comes next. The children who attended those schools eventually grew older. Some left town, some remained, some witnessed the gradual decline of their communities. Others moved away before decline began. Each carried memories of places that would later become ghost towns. Memories of playgrounds, classrooms, friends, neighborhoods, ordinary moments that history books rarely record. As we continue traveling beneath the stars, those ordinary moments seem increasingly important because ghost towns are not really stories about buildings. They are stories about people. The buildings simply help us remember. A schoolhouse reminds us of students. A general store reminds us of customers. A train station reminds us of travelers. A home reminds us of families. Behind every structure stood human lives, human hopes, human memories. And tonight, as we follow these quiet roads through Arizona's sleeping desert, we carry those stories with us. The stars remain bright above, the mountains remain still, and somewhere ahead, another forgotten town waits patiently beneath the moonlight, ready to share the next chapter of Arizona's remarkable history. The night moves forward quietly. Somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, morning is still hours away. The desert remains wrapped in darkness, peaceful and still beneath a blanket of stars. As we continue our journey, let us follow one of the oldest paths in Arizona. Not a railroad, not a highway, but a river. Long before miners arrived, long before stagecoaches crossed the territory, long before maps showed towns and settlements, rivers guided travelers through the Southwest. They provided water in an otherwise dry landscape. They offered routes through difficult terrain. They became lifelines. One such river was the Colorado River. Along its banks, small communities appeared and disappeared over generations. Some lasted only a few years, others survived for decades before fading into history. Tonight we visit one of those forgotten places, a settlement called Ehrenberg. Today only traces remain of its former importance. Yet during the 19th century, Ehrenberg served as a critical crossing point along the Colorado River. Imagine arriving there in the 1870s. The journey has been long. Dust covers your clothing. The desert stretches endlessly behind you. Ahead lies the river. Water glimmers beneath the Arizona sun. For travelers, the sight brings relief. Water means life. Water means rest. Water means possibility. Around the crossing, a community developed. Ferry operators transported people across the river. Merchants sold supplies. Hotels offered lodging. Workers supported transportation networks connecting Arizona with California and beyond. The settlement became busy, not because of gold, not because of silver, but because of movement. People were constantly arriving and departing. Wagons rolled into town. Travelers exchanged stories. News spread quickly. The community became part of a larger network linking distant regions of the American West. Transportation has always shaped history. Towns located along important routes often prosper. When those routes change, fortunes can change as well. Over time, new railroads appeared. Different transportation systems developed. Travel patterns shifted. The importance of river crossings declined. Gradually, Ehrenberg lost much of the activity that had once sustained it. Businesses closed. Residents moved elsewhere. The familiar cycle unfolded once again. Another Arizona settlement slowly drifted toward silence. As we leave Ehrenberg behind, the stars continue shining above us. The road carries us farther into the sleeping desert. The landscape feels almost endless. Yet scattered throughout this vast region are reminders that people once attempted to create permanent communities in places that now seem remote. Some succeeded, some did not. All contributed to Arizona's story. As we travel, let us think about the people who opened businesses in these towns, the shopkeepers, the hotel owners, the bakers, the blacksmiths. History often focuses on miners because mining drove the growth of many communities. But miners alone could never create a town. A town requires many different people performing many different jobs. Imagine opening a small general store in Arizona around 1895. Every item on your shelves has traveled a great distance. Food, tools, clothing, household supplies. Everything required transportation across difficult terrain. Keeping a store stock demanded constant effort, yet store owners played an important role. Their businesses became gathering places. Residents stopped by not only to purchase goods but also to exchange news. Conversations filled the aisles. Friendships formed, information spread. In many ways, the general store served as the heart of the community. Now imagine returning decades later. The building stands empty. Dust covers the floor. Shelves are bare. The conversations have vanished. Only silence remains. Ghost towns encourage us to imagine those missing sounds, the sounds that once brought life to abandoned places. As the night deepens, our journey leads us toward another lesser-known settlement. This town existed because of one of the most powerful forces in American history: hope. Hope can build entire communities. A rumor of mineral wealth, a promising railroad proposal, a new transportation route, a fertile valley, any of these could inspire people to relocate and begin again. Throughout Arizona's history, thousands of individuals made exactly that choice. Many left comfortable lives elsewhere. Many accepted uncertainty. Many risked failure. And despite all the hardships, many considered the risk worthwhile. The frontier rewarded optimism, not always, but often enough to keep the dream alive. Tonight we arrive at a settlement that once embodied that optimism, a small community whose future seemed bright when it first appeared. Families built homes there, businesses opened, plans were made, children played in its streets. Residents imagined decades of prosperity. Yet within a relatively short time, circumstances changed. Economic conditions shifted. Opportunities diminished. People departed. What had seemed permanent revealed itself to be temporary. Such stories appear repeatedly throughout Arizona's history. And perhaps they reveal something universal. Nothing remains exactly the same forever. Communities evolve, industries change, populations move. Even the largest cities experience transformation. Ghost towns simply make those changes easier to see. They preserve moments that might otherwise be forgotten. As we continue walking through the quiet landscapes of Arizona's past, another thought begins to emerge. Many ghost towns were not failures, at least not in the way people sometimes imagine. Some existed precisely as long as they needed to. A mining deposit was discovered, resources were extracted, workers earned wages, businesses operated, families built lives. Then circumstances changed. The community fulfilled its purpose and eventually faded. Viewed this way, ghost towns become less tragic and more reflective of the constant movement that shaped the American West. People adapted, moved, started over, built new communities elsewhere. Life continued. The story did not end when a town became abandoned. It simply moved to a new location. Perhaps some former residents of Arizona ghost towns later helped build Phoenix, or Tucson, or Los Angeles, or Denver. The people carried their experiences with them, the knowledge they gained, the memories they created. In that sense, ghost towns never completely disappear. Their influence continues through the lives of those who once called them home. The moon now hangs lower in the sky. The air feels cooler. The desert seems even quieter than before. Far away, mountains stand like dark guardians, watching over forgotten settlements. The roads continue winding through valleys and across open plains, and somewhere ahead lies another chapter waiting to be discovered, another collection of stories, another community that once believed its future would last forever. For now, allow yourself to imagine those distant lights from long ago, the glow of lanterns in windows, the sound of quiet conversations drifting through the night, the comfort of home in a remote corner of Arizona. And as those images slowly settle into the darkness, Let the peaceful rhythm of the desert carry you gently onward toward the next forgotten town. The desert remains quiet. The road stretches ahead through darkness, illuminated only by moonlight and the stars above. Around us, Arizona sleeps. The mountains stand motionless. The valleys rest beneath a silver glow. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, morning waits patiently for its turn to arrive. For now, however, the night still belongs to us. As we continue our journey through Arizona's ghost towns, let us travel toward a place that once carried one of the most valuable resources in the American West. Not gold, not silver, not copper, but information. Today, information travels instantly. A message can cross the country in seconds. News appears immediately. Communication happens so quickly that we rarely stop to think about it. Yet during the 19th century, communication moved at a very different pace. A letter might require days or even weeks to reach its destination. News traveled with travelers. Important information often arrived long after events had occurred. Then came a remarkable invention, the telegraph. Suddenly, messages could move faster than people. For communities scattered across the West, this felt revolutionary. Telegraph lines connected distant settlements. They linked Arizona to the rest of the country. They reduced isolation. They changed daily life. Small telegraph stations appeared throughout the region. Some developed into communities of their own. Others supported nearby towns and transportation routes. Tonight, imagine a lonely telegraph station somewhere in Arizona around 1888. The building stands beside a dusty route crossing the desert. Inside, a telegraph operator works quietly. A lantern glows nearby. Outside, the night is still. The stars shine overhead. Then suddenly, a message arrives. Click, click, click. The telegraph key taps steadily. A message from another town, perhaps hundreds of miles away. The operator listens carefully, records the information, and prepares it for delivery. Simple by modern standards, extraordinary for its time. The telegraph helped shrink enormous distances. It connected communities that otherwise might have felt completely isolated. Yet many of the places that once depended upon telegraph stations have disappeared. The wires are gone. The buildings have vanished. The operators are long forgotten. But for a brief period, they helped shape life throughout the American West. As we continue onward, another thought comes to mind. Many ghost towns are remembered because of dramatic events. A mining boom, a major discovery, a sudden decline. But most daily life was not dramatic. Most days were ordinary. And perhaps ordinary days tell us more about history than extraordinary ones. Imagine waking up in a small Arizona town around the year 1900. The sun rises over distant mountains. Breakfast is prepared. Children get ready for school. Workers begin their routines. Store owners unlock their doors. The town slowly comes to life. Nothing remarkable happens. No major discoveries. No historic events. Just another ordinary day. And yet those ordinary days formed the foundation of every community. Thousands upon thousands of them. People often imagine the Old West as a place of constant excitement. Gunfights, outlaws, treasure, adventure. Certainly, those things existed from time to time, but most residents spent their days doing familiar tasks, working, cooking, cleaning, raising children, maintaining homes, helping neighbors. The routines were surprisingly similar to those found in small towns throughout American history. Ghost towns become more meaningful when we remember that reality, because behind every abandoned building stood ordinary people living ordinary lives. As the night continues, we arrive near the remains of another forgotten settlement. This one never grew particularly large. It never became famous. yet it survived for several decades before fading away. And that alone makes it interesting. Small communities often face challenges that larger towns could avoid. A single business closure might affect everyone. A poor harvest could create hardship throughout the area. A decline in mining production could impact dozens of families simultaneously. Resilience became essential. People learned to adapt. They repaired equipment instead of replacing it. They shared resources. They supported one another during difficult times. Life required cooperation. Imagine a particularly difficult summer. Temperatures remain high for weeks. Water becomes scarce. Business slows. Yet residents continue moving forward. They adjust. They endure. And eventually conditions improve. Stories like these rarely appear in history books, yet they occurred constantly. The history of Arizona was built not only through major events, but also through countless acts of persistence. People simply continued. Day after day, season after season, year after year. That persistence allowed communities to survive longer than outsiders might have expected. As we walk quietly through the remains of forgotten towns, it becomes easier to appreciate those efforts. An abandoned schoolhouse, a weathered storefront, a crumbling foundation. Each structure represents years of labor, years of maintenance, years of hope. The buildings themselves may no longer serve their original purpose, but they still tell stories. Stories of people trying to create stability in challenging environments. Stories of families building lives beneath wide Arizona skies. Stories of communities that once felt permanent. The moonlight reveals another old road crossing the landscape. Many roads like this connected settlements throughout the territory. Some carried wagons. Some carried stagecoaches. Others eventually carried automobiles. Transportation evolved constantly. Each new development created winners and losers. A town located along an important route might prosper. A town bypassed by newer routes might decline. This pattern occurred repeatedly throughout Arizona. When railroads arrived, some communities flourished, others faded. When highways appeared decades later, the process repeated itself. The movement of people shapes the movement of opportunity, and opportunity often determines whether a town survives. As the hours pass, the desert grows colder. The air feels crisp now. The stars seem sharper. A faint breeze moves across open land. Somewhere in the darkness, an old cemetery rests beside a forgotten settlement. Many ghost towns have cemeteries nearby. Small, quiet places containing the names of people who helped build these communities. Teachers, miners, children, merchants, ranchers, families. The cemeteries often remain long after buildings disappear. They serve as reminders that history is deeply personal. Behind every town were individuals. People with hopes, people with worries, people with plans for the future. People who never imagined that future travelers would someday describe their hometown as a ghost town. Yet perhaps there is something comforting about that. The buildings may weather, the streets may empty, but the stories endure as long as someone remembers them, as long as someone pauses to wonder about the lives once lived there. Tonight, beneath the Arizona stars, we are doing exactly that. The road continues ahead. The desert remains peaceful. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, another forgotten town waits patiently in the darkness, ready to share its story. For now, simply listen to the stillness. Imagine the moonlight falling across old wooden buildings. Imagine distant mountains beneath a sea of stars. And allow yourself to drift gently onward through the quiet history of Arizona. The night feels deeper now. The moon has drifted lower toward the western horizon, and the desert has settled into a profound stillness. The roads are empty. The valleys are quiet. Even the wind seems content to rest for a while. Above us, countless stars continue their slow movement across the Arizona sky. For generations, people have looked upward at these same stars. Miners finishing late shifts, ranchers checking livestock, railroad workers waiting for trains, travelers crossing the desert, children standing outside before bedtime. The stars watch them all. And tonight they watch over our journey as well. As we continue through Arizona's forgotten places, let us travel toward a town whose story was shaped not only by mining, but by isolation. Many ghost towns were remote, extremely remote. Today it is difficult to fully appreciate what that meant. Modern roads connect even distant regions. Communication happens instantly. Supplies can be delivered quickly. But life in a remote Arizona settlement during the late 19th century was very different. Imagine living in a town surrounded by mountains. The nearest large community is many miles away. The roads are rough. Travel requires significant effort. If a wagon breaks down, help may not arrive quickly. If supplies run low, replacement shipments might take days or weeks. Everyday life demanded patience and preparation. People learned to plan carefully. A family could not simply drive to a nearby store whenever they needed something. Essential goods had to be stocked in advance. Food, tools, medicine, fuel, everything required foresight. Many communities survived because residents became remarkably resourceful. Nothing was wasted, broken equipment was repaired, clothing was patched and reused, buildings were maintained year after year. The frontier encouraged creativity, and necessity encouraged resilience. As we travel deeper into the sleeping desert, imagine a small Arizona town sometime around 1908. The day has ended. Lanterns glow softly in a handful of windows. A dog barks in the distance. Some families are preparing for bed. Others sit quietly on porches, enjoying the cooler evening air. The town is peaceful, comfortable, ordinary. No one is thinking about ghost towns. No one imagines that future generations will walk through abandoned streets wondering what life was once like there. For the residents, life is happening now. The future remains unknown. Perhaps that is one reason these stories feel so human. Everyone believes, at least for a while, that the present will continue. People build homes because they expect to live in them. They plant trees because they expect those trees to grow. They establish schools because they expect children to remain. The act of building a town is ultimately an act of optimism. It represents confidence in tomorrow. As we continue walking through Arizona's history, that optimism appears again and again. Sometimes it was rewarded, sometimes it was not, yet it always existed. The desert itself offered no guarantees, only possibilities. As the night continues, our path takes us toward another forgotten piece of Arizona's past. This time, a railroad siding, a small settlement that grew around a stretch of track. Railroads transformed the American West. They carried ore from mines. They delivered supplies. They transported passengers. Communities often developed wherever trains stopped regularly. Some remained small, others expanded into thriving towns. Imagine standing beside a railroad station late at night. The desert is dark and quiet. Then far away, a faint sound appears, a distant whistle. At first it is barely audible, then gradually it grows louder. The train approaches. Its headlight shines across the landscape. Steel wheels rumble along the tracks. Passengers prepare to disembark. Workers gather freight. Mailbags are unloaded. For a brief period, the station becomes the center of activity. Then the train departs. The sounds fade, and silence returns. This rhythm repeated itself countless times across Arizona. The arrival of the train, the departure of the train, the brief burst of activity between them. Many communities depended upon those moments. Without railroad connections, survival became far more difficult. Yet transportation systems change, routes change, economic priorities change. And sometimes a town that once sat along an important rail line suddenly finds itself less essential. When that happened, decline often followed. Businesses struggled, population decreased, families relocated. Eventually, another settlement joined the growing list of Arizona ghost towns. As we move onward through the darkness, let us think about the children who grew up in these places. History often remembers adults, the miners, the ranchers, the merchants, the investors. But every town also contained children. Children who attended school. Children who played games in dusty streets. Children who explored nearby hills and valleys. Children who considered these communities their entire world. Imagine a summer afternoon in a small Arizona town. School is not in session. The sky is clear. The sun is bright. Children race through the streets. Some invent games. Others explore nearby terrain. They climb rocks, collect interesting stones, search for lizards, and return home when evening approaches. Simple moments, yet meaningful ones. Many of those children eventually left. Some pursued opportunities elsewhere. Some followed family members to larger cities. Others remained until their communities declined. But wherever they went, they carried memories. Memories of desert landscapes, memories of small town life, memories of places that later became ghost towns. Those memories mattered because while buildings eventually disappear, memories often survive much longer. As the hours pass, the stars continue moving overhead. The desert remains peaceful. A faint chill now lingers in the air. Somewhere in the distance, an old windmill stands against the night sky. Windmills were once common throughout Arizona. They provided water for livestock, water for homes, water for entire communities. The steady turning of a windmill became a familiar sight across the West. Even today, abandoned windmills sometimes remain near ghost towns, rusting, weathered, silent, yet still standing, like so many other remnants of Arizona's past. As we continue our journey, it becomes increasingly clear that ghost towns are not merely abandoned places. They are time capsules, fragments of history preserved within the desert. Each one offers a glimpse into a particular moment, a particular dream, a particular chapter of human experience. And together they form a remarkable story, a story about ambition, about resilience, about adaptation, about the people who came to Arizona seeking opportunity beneath vast skies and distant mountains. Some found success, some encountered disappointment. Most experienced a mixture of both. Yet all became part of the larger history of the American West. The moon now hangs low above the horizon. The stars seem brighter in the darkness around it. And somewhere, far beyond the eastern mountains, morning continues its slow approach. Not yet. There is still time before dawn, still more roads to follow, still more forgotten towns waiting quietly beneath the stars. For now, allow yourself to imagine the gentle sound of a distant train fading into the desert night. Imagine the quiet streets of a sleeping frontier town. Imagine lantern light glowing softly in windows long ago. And let the peaceful rhythm of Arizona's history carry you onward into the next chapter of our journey. The desert is at its quietest now. The deepest hours of the night have arrived. The moon rests low above the western horizon, casting a gentle silver light across the land. Long shadows stretch across dry washes and open valleys. The mountains appear softer now, their outlines blending into the darkness. There is something special about these hours before dawn. Most people are asleep, the world feels paused. Even time itself seems to move more slowly. And perhaps that makes it the perfect moment to continue our journey through Arizona's forgotten places. Tonight, let us leave the larger mining towns behind for a while. Instead, We will visit the smaller settlements, the places that rarely appear in guidebooks, the places whose names have nearly disappeared from memory, the places that existed quietly, served their purpose, and gradually faded away. One of the fascinating things about Arizona's ghost towns is that many were never large enough to attract much attention. Some consisted of only a few dozen buildings, a handful of families, a small store, perhaps a post office, maybe a school. Yet to the people who lived there, those communities were just as important as any city. Imagine arriving in a tiny Arizona settlement around 1912. The population might be only 100 people, perhaps fewer. Everyone knows everyone else. The store owner recognizes every customer. Children know every family in town. News spreads quickly because there are few secrets in a community that small. Life moves at a different pace. People greet one another by name. Neighbors help each other repair fences or roofs. When someone becomes ill, the entire community notices. When someone celebrates a success, everyone shares in the happiness. Small towns create a unique sense of connection, and throughout Arizona's history, hundreds of such communities existed. Most are gone now, but their stories remain. As we continue along our moonlit road, imagine one of these settlements during harvest season. The air is warm, the sky is clear, people work from sunrise until sunset. There is always something to do. Livestock must be cared for, buildings must be maintained, water must be managed carefully. Life in the desert rarely allowed much idle time. Yet despite the hard work, many residents found satisfaction in their daily routines. There is a certain comfort in knowing your place within a community, in understanding how your efforts contribute to something larger than yourself. The rancher provides livestock. The merchant supplies goods. The teacher educates children. The blacksmith repairs equipment. Each person plays a role. Together, those roles create a functioning community. Ghost towns remind us how many people contributed to building the American West, not just famous figures, not just wealthy investors, but ordinary individuals whose names are largely forgotten today. As we travel farther into the night, another image begins to emerge, a lonely post office standing beside a dusty road. For many frontier communities, the post office served as a vital connection to the outside world. Letters carried news from distant relatives, business information arrived by mail, government documents arrived by mail, magazines and newspapers arrived by mail. The post office represented communication, connection, belonging. Imagine the excitement of receiving a letter in 1903. Perhaps it comes from family members living hundreds of miles away. Perhaps it contains news about a wedding, a birth, a new job, or simply a description of daily life elsewhere. Today we receive information constantly, but in those days, a single letter could become the highlight of an entire week. Residents often looked forward to mail delivery with genuine anticipation. And when a settlement eventually lost its post office, people understood that change was coming. The loss of a post office often signaled decline. Population numbers had fallen, activity had slowed, the community was shrinking. In many ghost towns, the post office became one of the last institutions to close. Its closure marked the end of an era. As we continue walking through Arizona's history, let us pause for a moment beside an old cemetery. Many ghost towns have one, often located on a nearby hillside, sometimes enclosed by simple fencing, sometimes almost hidden beneath desert vegetation. The cemeteries are quiet places, peaceful places, places that invite reflection. The names on the markers tell stories of their own. Some individuals lived long lives, others passed away surprisingly young. Many endured hardships that modern people can scarcely imagine. Yet together, they helped create the communities we have been exploring tonight. The cemeteries remind us that history is deeply personal. Every town was built by individuals. Every building was constructed by human hands. Every street once carried real people living real lives. When we visit ghost towns, we are not simply looking at old structures. We are remembering the people behind them. The desert preserves those memories in subtle ways. An old foundation, a rusted gate, a weathered headstone, a forgotten road disappearing into the distance. Small details become powerful reminders of the past. As the night moves forward, a faint breeze returns. It sweeps gently across the landscape. The sound is soft and calming, the kind of sound that seems perfectly suited to these quiet hours before dawn. Far above, the stars continue their silent journey. The constellations slowly shift positions. Generations of Arizona residents use those same stars to navigate, to tell time, to mark the passing seasons. The night sky was both practical and beautiful. Even today, standing beneath it can inspire a sense of wonder. Imagine a rancher finishing work late in the evening around 1897. Before returning home, he pauses for a moment and looks upward. The stars are brilliant. The air is cool. The desert stretches endlessly into darkness. For a few moments, everything is quiet. Perhaps he feels grateful. Perhaps he feels tired. Perhaps he thinks about the future. Whatever thoughts pass through his mind, they belong to a world that no longer exists. Yet somehow, beneath these same stars, that world feels surprisingly close. As we continue our journey, another realization emerges. Many ghost towns disappeared not because people failed, but because circumstances changed, transportation changed, markets changed, technology changed, opportunities moved elsewhere. The people adapted, they relocated, they started new chapters. Life continued. The towns became quiet, but the stories continued traveling with those who left. In that sense, ghost towns are not only about endings, they are also about beginnings. The beginning of new journeys, new communities, new opportunities. The American West was built upon movement, and movement often created both growth and decline at the same time. As we approach the final hours before dawn, the desert feels peaceful beyond description. The moon now sits close to the horizon. The air has become noticeably cooler. The silence feels deep and comforting. Somewhere ahead, morning waits beyond the darkness. But not yet. There are still more stories to tell. Still more roads to follow. Still more forgotten towns resting quietly beneath the Arizona stars. For now, simply imagine yourself standing beside an old desert road. The sky filled with stars, the mountains dark against the horizon, the gentle breeze moving through the night, and the countless lives that once filled these quiet places with hope, determination, and dreams of tomorrow. Allow those images to drift softly through your mind as our journey continues onward through the sleeping landscapes of Arizona's past. The night is beginning to change, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to notice if you are paying close attention. The stars still fill the sky. The desert remains quiet. The mountains remain dark silhouettes against the horizon. Yet somewhere, far to the east, beyond countless miles of desert and distant ridges, the first hint of morning is preparing to arrive. There's a special feeling that exists in the hours just before dawn. The world feels suspended between yesterday and tomorrow, between darkness and light, between memory and possibility. And perhaps there is no better time to reflect on the ghost towns of Arizona, because ghost towns themselves exist between worlds. They belong partly to the past and partly to the present. They are no longer living communities, yet they are not entirely gone. They remain, waiting quietly, preserving fragments of another era beneath the desert sky. As we continue our journey, let us visit one final category of Arizona settlement: the homestead. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thousands of people attempted to establish homes across the American West. Some settled in growing towns, others chose something more difficult. They selected isolated pieces of land and built lives from the ground up. Imagine arriving at a remote Arizona homestead around 1915. The landscape stretches endlessly around you. There are no nearby neighbors, no busy streets, no railroad station, no store within walking distance, only open land, a small house, perhaps a barn, a windmill turning slowly in the breeze, and a family determined to make a life there. The work never truly ends. Water must be secured, fences must be repaired, livestock must be cared for, buildings require constant maintenance. Every season brings new challenges: summer heat, winter cold, unexpected storms, periods of drought. Yet despite those hardships, many families remained. They planted gardens, raised children, built routines, created homes. The word home appears frequently throughout the stories of Arizona's ghost towns. And for good reason, because ultimately these stories are not about abandoned buildings. They are about people creating homes in difficult places. Some homes lasted generations, others existed only briefly, yet all carried meaning for those who lived there. As the desert slowly moves toward morning, imagine standing outside one of those homesteads before sunrise. The air is cool, the stars remain visible, the landscape feels almost completely still. A lantern glows softly through a nearby window. Inside, a family sleeps. Outside, the desert waits patiently for daylight. Moments like these occurred countless times throughout Arizona's history. Ordinary moments, quiet moments, yet they formed the foundation of life across the territory. History often remembers dramatic events, but life is usually built from ordinary days, ordinary mornings, ordinary evenings, ordinary conversations. Ghost towns remind us of that truth. Every abandoned structure once existed within someone's daily routine. A child opened that door, a parent sat on that porch, a teacher stood in that classroom, a shopkeeper greeted customers in that store. The buildings may be empty now, but they were once full of life. As we continue onward, another thought begins to emerge. Many people visit ghost towns searching for mystery. They imagine secrets hidden beneath the desert, lost treasures, unsolved stories, forgotten legends, and certainly some mysteries remain. But perhaps the greatest mystery is something simpler: how quickly time passes. One generation builds a town, the next generation expands it, the generation after that watches it decline. Then eventually the town becomes history. The process can happen surprisingly fast. A bustling community becomes a quiet memory within only a few decades. Yet while that may sound sad, there is also something beautiful about it, because every generation leaves traces behind: photographs, letters, buildings, roads, stories. The people who built Arizona's ghost towns are gone, yet we still remember them. We still walk through their streets. We still wonder about their lives. In that way, they remain part of the present. The eastern horizon is beginning to lighten now, only slightly. A faint band of gray appears beneath the stars. Morning is approaching. The desert senses it before we do. Temperatures begin to change. Nighttime animals slowly retreat. Birds prepare for another day. The landscape remains quiet, but it feels different somehow. Expectant, as if the desert itself knows dawn is near. Our journey has taken us through mining camps, railroad towns, river crossings, ranch settlements, homesteads, schools, stores, cemeteries, and countless stories. Some communities became famous, others nearly vanished from memory, yet each contributed something important to Arizona's history. Each represented a group of people willing to take a chance on the future. That willingness to try may be the most enduring lesson of all. The people who built these towns were not certain of success. They faced uncertainty every day, yet they continued. They worked, they planned, they hoped. And through those efforts, they helped shape the American West. As the first signs of dawn spread across the horizon, the stars begin losing some of their brightness, not because they are disappearing, only because another light is arriving. The mountains become slightly easier to see. The outlines of valleys emerge from darkness. Details slowly return to the landscape. The desert is waking up. Soon, sunlight will touch the highest peaks. Soon, shadows will retreat. Soon, another Arizona day will begin. But before that happens, let us pause for a moment. Let us stand quietly beneath the fading stars. Let us look across the vast desert. And let us remember the countless people whose lives unfolded here. The miners, the ranchers, the teachers, the railroad workers, the children, the families, the dreamers, the builders, the ordinary people who transformed empty landscapes into communities. Their towns may be quiet now, but their stories remain, carried by the wind, preserved in the desert, remembered by those willing to listen. And as the first light of dawn slowly spreads across Arizona, our journey through the ghost towns of the desert continues toward its final chapters. The first light of morning is beginning to appear. Not sunlight, not yet. Just a gentle glow along the eastern horizon. The stars still shine overhead, but their brilliance is slowly fading. One by one, the brightest constellations begin surrendering the sky to the approaching day. The desert remains peaceful. The roads remain empty. The ghost towns remain silent. Yet something is changing. A new day is on its way. As we continue our journey through Arizona's forgotten communities, let us slow our pace even further. The night has carried us through stories of miners, ranchers, teachers, railroad workers, and families. Now, as dawn approaches, we can begin to see these towns differently, not as abandoned places, but as chapters. Each town represents a chapter in a much larger story. The story of people searching for opportunity, the story of communities rising and falling, the story of adaptation and change, and perhaps most importantly, the story of time itself. Time is everywhere in a ghost town. It exists in weathered wood. It exists in faded paint. It exists in cracked foundations and rusted machinery. Every surface tells a story about the years that have passed. Imagine walking slowly through a ghost town at dawn. The sky's growing brighter. The air is cool and fresh. The buildings stand quietly around you. For a moment, everything feels suspended between past and present. You notice details that might otherwise go unseen. A doorway worn smooth by thousands of hands. A staircase climbed by generations of residents. A window frame that once overlooked a busy street. Small details, yet each one hints at countless lives. History often survives through details. A photograph, a letter, a diary entry. A family story passed from one generation to the next. The ghost towns of Arizona are filled with such details, and together they help us imagine the people who once lived there. As the eastern sky brightens, let us think about one of the most powerful forces that shape these communities: the seasons. Modern life sometimes makes it easy to forget how important seasons once were. Air conditioning protects us from heat. Heating systems protect us from cold. Food arrives year-round. Transportation operates regardless of weather. But for the people who lived in Arizona's early settlements, the seasons mattered deeply. Summer brought intense heat. Autumn offered relief. Winter could bring cold nights and occasional storms. Spring often signaled renewal. Each season influenced daily life. Work schedules changed, travel conditions changed, economic activity changed. Entire communities adapted to the rhythm of the year. Imagine a spring morning in an Arizona mining town around 1907. The air is pleasant. Wildflowers bloom across parts of the desert. The surrounding hills seem more colorful than usual. Residents step outside to begin another day. Children prepare for school. Workers head toward the mines. Store owners open their doors. The town feels alive, full of possibility. No one knows exactly what the future holds, but that uncertainty feels exciting rather than frightening. The future seems open, and perhaps that feeling existed in every Arizona ghost town at some point. A moment when possibilities appeared endless, a moment when residents looked ahead with confidence, a moment before anyone could imagine decline. As we continue walking through these landscapes, it becomes clear that hope leaves traces behind. Not physical traces, emotional ones. The decision to build a school, the decision to plant trees, the decision to establish a business. All of these actions reflect optimism. They reflect belief in tomorrow. The ghost towns of Arizona were built by people who believed tomorrow would come. And for many years, they were right. The communities thrived. Families grew. Businesses prospered. Life moved forward. The fact that many towns later disappeared does not erase those successes. It simply reminds us that success can take different forms. Some communities lasted a decade. Some lasted a century. All contributed something meaningful. The horizon is noticeably brighter now. A faint blue color has begun replacing the darkness. The stars continue fading. The mountains are becoming easier to see. Their shapes emerge gradually from the night. Across the desert, birds are beginning to stir. A few early calls drift through the cool air. The first sounds of morning, gentle, unhurried, natural. Imagine standing outside a small Arizona home at this hour more than 100 years ago. The family inside is beginning to wake. Breakfast preparations will start soon. The day's work awaits. The town will gradually come alive. Another ordinary day is about to begin. And yet, from our perspective, that ordinary day belongs to history. The people are gone. The town is silent. But for a moment, through imagination, we can almost see it, almost hear it, almost step back into it. That is one of the gifts ghost towns offer. They encourage us to imagine, to wonder, to connect with lives different from our own. As morning approaches, another realization emerges. Ghost towns are often described as places that died, but perhaps that description is incomplete, because many of these towns continue teaching us. They continue inspiring curiosity. They continue attracting visitors. They continue preserving history. In that sense, they remain alive in a different way. Their purpose has changed, but their stories endure. The eastern horizon now glows softly with the first colors of dawn. Pale blue, soft gold, hints of pink. The desert is waking. The long night is coming to an end. Soon sunlight will touch the highest mountain peaks. Soon shadows will retreat across valleys. Soon the landscape will reveal itself once more. But before that happens, let us continue walking quietly through these forgotten places. Let us appreciate their silence. Let us appreciate their stories. And let us carry their memories with us as the first true light of morning begins spreading across the Arizona desert. The journey is not over yet. There are still a few miles to travel, still a few reflections to share, still a sunrise waiting just beyond the horizon. And so together, we continue onward into the growing light of a new day. The horizon is glowing now. A thin band of gold stretches across the eastern sky, growing brighter with each passing moment. The darkness that covered the desert throughout the night is slowly retreating. The stars are disappearing. Not all at once, The faintest vanish first. The brighter ones linger a little longer. And then, one by one, they too fade into the approaching morning. The desert is waking. The mountains that were once little more than dark silhouettes now reveal their shapes and textures. Rocky ridges emerge from the shadows. Dry washes become visible again. Cacti stand quietly across the landscape, waiting for the warmth of the day. For hours, we have traveled through Arizona's ghost towns beneath the cover of night. We have followed old roads, visited forgotten settlements, remembered the people who built communities across some of the most challenging landscapes in America. Now, as sunrise approaches, it feels like the right moment to reflect upon what these places truly represent. At first glance, a ghost town might appear empty, a collection of abandoned buildings, a few weathered foundations, perhaps a rusted piece of machinery, a fading road disappearing into the desert. Yet when we look more closely, we begin to see something else. We begin to see effort, human effort. Every board was carried there by someone. Every wall was built by someone. Every road was cleared by someone. Entire communities emerged because ordinary people invested their time, energy, and hope into creating them. The American West was not built only by famous figures. It was built by thousands of individuals whose names rarely appear in history books. A carpenter repairing a roof, a teacher preparing lessons, a rancher tending livestock, a merchant stocking shelves, a mother caring for her family, a child walking to school. Together, those ordinary lives created extraordinary communities. Ghost towns remind us of that truth. As the sky brightens, imagine standing in one of these towns during its final years. Not its beginning, not its peak, but its closing chapter. The streets are quieter now. A few buildings stand empty. Several families have already moved away. Yet life continues. Children still attend school. Neighbors still greet one another. Businesses still open each morning. Even when change becomes visible, people continue living their lives. History rarely announces itself. Most people do not realize they are witnessing the end of an era while it is happening. Only later does the significance become clear. That is true not only of ghost towns, but of history itself. People live in the present. Only future generations can fully see the shape of the past. As we continue through the cool morning air, another thought emerges. Many of Arizona's ghost towns were born from optimism, a new mining discovery, a railroad connection, a promising business opportunity, a fertile valley. People arrived because they believed something good was possible. Sometimes they were right, sometimes circumstances changed, yet the willingness to try remained. Again and again, people crossed deserts and mountains in search of better futures. That spirit helped shape Arizona, and it helped shape America as a whole. The first sunlight is now touching the highest mountain peaks. Far away, the summits glow softly with golden light. The valleys remain in shadow for a little longer, but the day has begun. The transition is beautiful, gradual, peaceful, almost unnoticed unless you pause long enough to watch it happen. Ghost towns teach a similar lesson. Change often happens gradually. A new business opens, another closes. A family arrives, another leaves. Years pass, generations change. What seems permanent slowly transforms. The process is rarely dramatic. It is simply part of life. The desert understands this better than anyone. The desert has watched centuries unfold. It has witnessed indigenous communities living across these lands long before Arizona became a state. It watched explorers arrive. It watched miners establish camps. It watched railroads cross valleys. It watched towns appear and disappear. And through it all, the desert remained, patient, enduring, quiet. As the sunlight spreads farther across the landscape, The colors begin to change. The reds and browns of the rocks become richer. The greens of desert plants become more visible. The sky grows brighter with every passing minute. The ghost towns remain silent. Yet in the morning light, they seem less lonely somehow. Perhaps because daylight reveals their stories more clearly. An abandoned building is no longer simply a structure. It becomes evidence of lives once lived. A schoolhouse becomes evidence of children learning. A general store becomes evidence of neighbors gathering. A railroad station becomes evidence of travelers arriving from distant places. The sunlight reveals connections. It reveals history. And it reveals humanity. Imagine walking slowly down the main street of a ghost town at sunrise. The buildings stand quietly around you. The air is cool. The shadows are long. For a moment, it feels almost possible to step backward through time, to hear voices once again, to hear wagon wheels, to hear conversations drifting from nearby porches, to hear children laughing somewhere in the distance. The sounds are gone, but the imagination remains. And sometimes, imagination allows us to understand history in ways that facts alone cannot. As we continue our journey, the morning grows brighter. Birds move through the desert. A gentle breeze returns. The long night that accompanied us across Arizona is nearly over. Soon, the sun will rise fully above the horizon. Soon the landscape will shine beneath the warmth of a new day. But before that happens, there is one final lesson hidden within these ghost towns. A lesson about memory. Places survive because they are remembered. Stories survive because they are told. And people continue to matter long after they are gone, because someone takes the time to remember them. Tonight, we have remembered them. The miners, the ranchers, the teachers, the merchants, the railroad workers, the families, the children, the dreamers who built communities beneath Arizona's vast skies. Their towns may be quiet now, but their stories continue, carried forward by memory, preserved by history, and woven into the landscape of the American Southwest. The sun is almost here now. Its light waits just beyond the horizon. And as the desert prepares to welcome another day, we continue onward toward the final chapter of our journey through Arizona's ghost towns. The sun rises slowly over Arizona. At first, only a narrow edge of light appears above the horizon. Then gradually the morning sun lifts itself into the sky. Golden light spills across the desert. The mountains glow softly. Long shadows stretch across valleys and dry riverbeds. The landscape that spent the night hidden in darkness now reveals itself completely. A new day has begun, and our journey through the ghost towns of Arizona is reaching its end. For hours, we have traveled together through forgotten places. We have walked silent streets, visited abandoned schools, stood beside weathered stores, followed old railroad routes, crossed desert valleys where entire communities once stood. And throughout our journey, we have discovered something important. Ghost towns are not really about buildings. They are about people. The buildings simply help us remember. As the morning light spreads across the land, imagine looking out across Arizona from a high ridge. Below you lies the desert, the rivers, the mountains, the roads, and hidden throughout that vast landscape are hundreds of stories, some famous, most forgotten, each one connected to people who once believed they had found their place in the world. A miner arriving with dreams of striking silver, a teacher opening a small classroom, a merchant unlocking the door to a general store, a family planting trees beside a newly built home, a child running through dusty streets on a warm summer afternoon. They could not see the future. None of us can. They did not know which towns would prosper. They did not know which communities would disappear. They simply lived their lives, one day at a time. And perhaps that is why Their stories remain meaningful because in many ways they were no different from us. They worried about the future. They hoped for better days. They worked hard. They cared for their families. They celebrated successes. They endured disappointments. They built friendships. They built communities. They built lives. The passage of time eventually changed those communities. Mines closed. Railroads shifted routes. Businesses moved elsewhere. Families relocated. Buildings aged. The desert slowly reclaimed what had been left behind. Yet something remained. Memory. History. The quiet evidence that people had once stood here and tried to create something lasting. As sunlight reaches farther across the landscape, birds cross the morning sky. The cool air begins warming. The desert awakens fully. And suddenly the ghost towns seem different than they did during the night. Less mysterious, less lonely, more peaceful. Because daylight reveals a truth that darkness sometimes hides. These places are not merely ruins. They are reminders. Reminders that every generation leaves something behind. Sometimes it is a building, sometimes it is a road, sometimes it is a story, and sometimes it is simply the example of a life lived with courage and determination. The people who built Arizona's ghost towns lived in a world filled with uncertainty, water shortages, economic changes, isolation, harsh weather, unpredictable markets. Yet despite those challenges, they continued moving forward. They adapted, they persevered, they tried, again and again. That spirit remains visible even now, visible in every weathered structure still standing beneath the desert sun, visible in every forgotten road stretching toward the horizon, visible in every ghost town that refuses to be completely erased by time. The desert remembers, the mountains remember, the wind remembers, and now perhaps we remember too. As our journey comes to an end, let us take one final walk through a quiet Arizona ghost town. The sun is fully above the horizon now. Golden light fills the streets. The buildings stand peacefully beneath the morning sky. A gentle breeze moves through the desert. For a moment, everything feels still. And in that stillness, it becomes easy to imagine the past. The voices, the footsteps, the laughter, the conversations. The ordinary moments that once filled these streets with life. Then slowly the image begins to fade. The voices grow quieter. The footsteps disappear. The streets become silent once more. Only the morning remains, the desert remains, the sky remains, and that is enough. Because history does not require noise to survive. Sometimes it survives in silence. Sometimes it survives in sunlight falling across an old wooden building. Sometimes it survives in the imagination of someone willing to pause and wonder about the people who came before. Today, as another Arizona morning begins, the ghost towns continue their quiet existence. The desert stretches endlessly around them. The mountains watch from afar. The wind moves softly through empty streets. And the stories remain, waiting patiently, just as they have for generations. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the ghost towns of Arizona. As the sun climbs higher and the desert welcomes a new day, allow yourself to rest. Allow the images of quiet roads, distant mountains, forgotten towns, and endless skies to drift gently through your mind. The night has passed, the morning has arrived, and somewhere beneath the warm Arizona sun, the old ghost towns continue keeping their stories safe until the next traveler comes along to listen. And now, the desert is quiet once again.